On July 3rd, 2005, an anonymous user going by the name Ayndryl published this image on a then obscure website. In the years that followed, it would become the genesis of one of the internet's most mysterious enigmas, forgotten languages. For the next 2 decades, this mysterious user and a small group of like-minded individuals would continue publishing near PhD-level articles written in constructed languages, covering topics ranging from linguistics, extraterrestrial life and artificial intelligence, to cryptography, quantum physics, classified US government programs, consciousness, and secret military technologies. While browsing the Forgotten Languages website, I found myself wandering through a digital labyrinth that has been expanding for nearly 20 years. A place where the line between high-level intelligence, science, conspiracy theories, and absolute madness is so thin, it practically disappears. I couldn't stop trying to make sense of it all. What exactly is this project, and most importantly, who is this enigmatic character that goes by the name Ayndryl? Some of you might already be familiar with this Forgotten Languages mystery. After all, the story has captivated millions of people from various internet communities ever since the website came online. But after spending days going deep down this rabbit hole, I became convinced that the true identity of Ayndryl leads somewhere far darker than an internet mystery. It leads to a crime. I must add that even though I can present a dozen different pieces of circumstantial evidence linking this mysterious figure to the website, he still maintains his plausible deniability. Thanks to some dedicated online mystery investigators, I'm not the first person to land on this name. But the story of how his alleged identity came about is just as fascinating as the website itself. When you first open the website, your brain tries to find a pattern. You will see blocks of text written in scripts that look vaguely familiar but are entirely unreadable. Almost none of it is in English. The website relies on a massive database of constructed languages known as conlangs. Some are synthetic derivations of dead languages, others seem entirely alien. You might find a paragraph that resembles Latin, Hindi, or Sanskrit, followed by a string of symbols that look like an alien mathematical formula, along with incredibly obscure diagrams or ancient images. The sheer volume of content is staggering. Every single day since 2009, new posts are published. To give you an idea of what could reasonably be called autistic dedication required to maintain this, creating a single functional constructed language would take years for a professional linguist, but Forgotten Languages contains dozens, if not hundreds of them seamlessly. But if the conlang encryption method resembling Cicada 3301 and other similar internet mysteries were not enough, the contents of these articles are what sets this project apart and far beyond anything we have ever seen. They cite peer-reviewed scientific papers, academic books, and then alongside the legitimate academic sources, they cite things labeled as defense reports and real CIA documents, of which most notable is the document relating to incidents in Gazelle. The presence of these alphanumeric codes adds an unsettling layer of realism to the project. I began looking into the early attempts to trace these specific reference numbers to see if it held any merit in the real world. A Reddit user going by the name TheCrawlerFL actually took the extraordinary step of submitting a formal Freedom of Information Act request to the CIA for the exact document. The account they shared detailing the aftermath of that request plunges the story into much darker territory. The subjects of these real-world documents directly aligned with the bizarre topics discussed in the unreadable posts. The authors of this website possess a deep, intimate knowledge of classified US intelligence structures, coupled with an absolute mastery of linguistics, operating consistently for over a decade without ever seeking monetization or fame. Naturally, I wanted to find out who was pulling the strings. Every website leaves a digital footprint, and Forgotten Languages is no exception. The mysterious blog has a designated admin, a ghost who goes by the pseudonyms Ayndryl, sometimes Ayndryl Regana. To understand the origins of this project and to trace the true identity of Ayndryl meant going backwards through time, digging through archived translation forums, freelancer directories, and obscure linguistics communities that most people have never heard of. And buried in those archives, I found something genuinely unexpected. The digital trail eventually led me to a defunct message board. Before Forgotten Languages had attracted any meaningful attention, before ARG investigation communities had even noticed it existed, Ayndryl had shown up on a linguistics forum and explained in plain English exactly how the website worked. In these rare, unshielded posts, he pulls back the curtain on the mechanics of the website, offering a chillingly clinical explanation of what they were actually building.
The idea was not to generate a cryptic language of some sort. The idea was this: to analyze syntactic and morphological drift for a given set of languages, and to explore whether such a drift produces a semantic drift correlate. In order to do so, we designed a software called node spaces that acts as a genetic algorithm that takes as input a given language, and then by stimulated annealing, subjects the language to a set of stochastic rules. If we consider the language as a complex adaptive system, by changing the boundary conditions, the language is forced to adapt itself, thus changing its syntactic structure and its morphological internal structure. Obviously, a boundary condition was this: change as you wish, but the change must yield a syntactically and phonetically coherent language. The result shows that language is also a dissipative structure, one that can finally derive in a total collapse of communication, unless you impose some restrictive superstructure upon it. We found it was then better to introduce the self-organizing constraints into the system, and the experiment shows that in order for you to obtain such a language, the system must, of necessity, include the speaker.
Hearing someone describe language creation through the lens of genetic algorithms and simulated annealing immediately shifts the perspective. We are no longer dealing with a hobbyist linguist or an alternate reality game designer. In a follow-up post on that same forum, Ayndryl elaborates further, weaving together advanced statistical mechanics, dynamic systems, and physics to explain how their software operates. Listen closely to the vocabulary used here, as this sophisticated knowledge base provides our first real glimpse into the true persona of our main character Ayndryl. This specific set of skills will become critical later in the story.
They are the label that we assign to the output once the system reaches a stable minimum. The system we are developing is called node spaces, and it is coupled to a statistical mechanical program called vectorial. What they do is implementing the Ising model, an all-time classic of statistical mechanical modeling. Originally, it was proposed to explain ferromagnetism, but the model is so powerful that it has over the years been adapted and applied to the study of a variety of phenomena, including language contact and language drift. As we have records of, say, Old Welsh, Middle Welsh, and Modern Welsh, then we have a traceable history of how Welsh changed. This is our Welsh manifold, M. The rules defining each state is given, roughly, by linguists. Phonology rules, consonantal conservation, palatalization, etc. Therefore, you can code the system to apply those rules to Modern Welsh and see what comes out. Of course, human brain is not a logical system. It is a highly complex and strange system. Nobody knows why a given change started operating in a given language, or why speakers gradually start modifying the language. Also, cultural and cognitive factors must be called for. This means we are facing a system that cannot be specified in an algorithmic way, neither using a rule-based approach. You need to use statistical mechanical maths.
Through these highly technical explanations, a distinct profile begins to take shape. The creator of Forgotten Languages is someone fluent in hard science, someone who views human communication through the strict mathematical lens of ferromagnetism, attractors, and thermodynamic systems. I think it's crucial to keep in mind that these discussions took place in 2011, long before artificial intelligence and large language models became the accessible, everyday technologies we know today. Whoever Ayndryl was, he was building this from the ground up, utilizing raw computational power and advanced statistical mechanics to simulate language evolution. The sheer complexity of programming required to build custom software like node spaces points to an individual with a deep, highly specialized academic background. Finding a person with this exact unusual blend of linguistics, advanced mathematics, and physics would narrow our suspect pool significantly. As I continued my quest to find out who was pulling the strings behind one of the biggest internet mysteries of the last decade, my most revealing piece of the puzzle emerged from the digital graveyard. Buried within an archived 2016 discussion on a forplebs.org discussion board, an anonymous investigator tracking the rapidly expanding Forgotten Languages anomaly posted a massive breakthrough. For the very first time in this labyrinth, I had stumbled upon an actual, real-world name. Going further down the rabbit hole to verify the origins of this claim, I began hunting for any digital trails of that email address. The search eventually led me to a defunct freelancer page. The account name was listed simply as Ayndryl. While that was one step closer, it was just a username. I needed something more concrete. Scrapping through deeper internet archives, I finally hit the jackpot. I uncovered an old professional profile of a freelance translator based out of Almeria, Spain. The profile offered translation services from Indonesian, Bosnian, Croatian, Bulgarian, Persian, Macedonian, and Serbian into native Spanish. The languages alone were highly unusual, but the section detailing the translator's areas of expertise was what actually locked the pieces into place. The profile claimed professional specialization in archaeology, astronomy and space, biology, chemistry, computer systems and networks, genetics, military, physics, religion, and so on. A list so comprehensive it reads like a parody, except it exactly mirrors the contents of the Forgotten Languages posts. Those anonymous forum investigators in 2016 suspected they had found a dedicated hobbyist or conduit being fed information from an unknown intelligence source. Little did they know, the name Ruben Sirden would surface 4 years later in the Spanish news media. The man who had been building a massive, untraceable linguistic database in the shadows of the internet was simultaneously at the dead center of one of the most sophisticated, audacious ancient artifact forgery cases in modern history. To understand what happened next, I need to take you to an archaeological site in the Basque country of Spain called Iruña-Veleia. In 2005 and 2006, the excavation team led by archaeologist named Eliseo Gil announced something extraordinary. They said they had found pottery fragments, 3rd century AD, and on these fragments were inscriptions that were poised to rewrite history. The finds included references to early Christian iconography that would predate known examples, and most significantly to the region, what appeared to be written Basque language from the 3rd century. This was huge because the first known written examples of the Basque language date to roughly 10th century. If Gill's team had genuinely found written Basque from 700 years earlier, it would have been one of the most important archaeological discoveries in European history. The finds were funded through a public subsidy of 3.7 million euros. The excavation team received substantial institutional support. Academic papers were commissioned. Experts were brought in. One of these experts was Ruben Cerdan. Cerdan produced technical reports validating the authenticity of the finds. The reports carried the weight of his stated credentials, a self-described nuclear physicist with a degree from Tel Aviv, someone with the technical capacity to analyze the ceramic evidence. What made this even more remarkable was that his Tel Aviv qualification was never actually validated in Spain. The investigation that followed took nearly 15 years to reach a verdict. When it did, the conclusion was unambiguous. The ceramic fragments had been altered. Inscriptions had been carved into ordinary Roman-era ceramics to make them appear historically significant. The Spanish court found that 36 ceramic pieces had been falsified. Eliseo Gil was convicted of fraud and document falsification. He was sentenced to 2 years and 3 months in prison. Ruben Cerdan was convicted of participating in the fraud. His role was specific. He wrote the reports that gave the fake findings scientific credibility. He was sentenced to 1 year and 3 months in prison. The digital fingerprints connecting Cerdan to the Ayndryl persona and the Forgotten Languages website go far beyond shared emails or geographic overlaps. They share a highly idiosyncratic intellectual DNA. It is a deeply unusual cross-disciplinary niche. Finding two different people applying quantum physics concepts to ancient Basque linguistics is statistically improbable. We also see an identical pattern of behavior. A key piece of evidence in Cerdan's criminal conviction was a scientific graph he submitted as original research to prove the ceramic fragments were real. Investigators discovered he had simply lifted the graph from the technical manual of a German nuclear electronics company called Fast Comtech. The Forgotten Languages website operates on this exact methodology. The author consistently takes real, highly obscure technical data from NASA, foreign physics labs, and classified CIA reports and embeds them with synthetic text to project an aura of unassailable scientific authority. A document linked to Ayndryl network titled Notes on Proto-Basque specifically attacks the very same philologists who helped expose the Iruña-Veleia fraud. When the legitimate academic community closed its doors to his theories, he simply built his own academic universe. The Forgotten Languages project is the digital manifestation of an exiled mind. As you scroll through the endless pages of unreadable alien text, you are left looking at the life's work of a man hiding behind a wall of complexity to ensure that this time, no one will ever be able to decipher or dismantle what he has to say.